I wanted to tell you a little about my life's journey so that you can understand why missions are so important to me. I actually grew up on a farm north of Dassel, and I can't remember a time that my parents didn't take me to church. There was a tug in my heart from a very young age to know God. I believed in Jesus, but I really didn't understand what faith was all about. When I was in elementary school, I went to a one-room school. But someone sent me a correspondence Bible study course from an organization called Rural Bible Crusade. So on my own, in my bedroom, as an elementary age school student, I started memorizing Bible verses. I did short Bible studies. No one told me to do that. I wanted to do that. I was committed to God's Word, to memorizing it, even though I didn't fully understand what I was memorizing. God was preparing my heart. But when I was about 12 years old, a childhood friend of mine told me clearly what Jesus had done for me. It was like a light bulb went on. I knew without a doubt that Jesus came to earth, lived a human life, suffered a painful death, and rose again, and he would have done that just for me. So I accepted that truth, and I have never looked back. Early on, I claimed these verses. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6 say, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths." I also claimed Proverbs 16:9. "A man's heart plans his way, but it's the Lord who directs his steps." All along my journey as a teenager and into the young adult years, God brought strong Christians into my life. And it was a good thing because I had a lot of conflict with my family about the path I had chosen. There were times as a teenager when I would cry out and say, "God, why does this have to be so hard? When all I want to do is follow you." But I wouldn't trade those difficulties for anything because what it did was it drove me into God's Word. I learned to know why I believe what I believe. Romans 5, verses 3 and 4 say, "We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us to develop endurance, and endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation." At one point in my early 20s, I was told by my family that if I didn't turn away from following the path I had chosen, that I would no longer be welcome in their home. I can remember falling on my knees and saying, "God, if it means I can't be with my family anymore, I'm going to follow you." And that's what I did. Fortunately, in the end, my family didn't carry out their threats of not having me be in their home, but I knew I had passed an important test. As life went on, those verses helped me along to find my path, and the Lord directed me and led me to a life partner who shared my faith and values. My calling was to be a nurse, and Dick worked in the field of IT. Obviously, we weren't exactly in a mission field. We hadn't been called to do that, but we had good jobs, so we could help support missionaries financially. Even before we were married, we had both been supporting missionaries, so that was not new when we got married. We just continued doing it and found new people to support. But we made ourselves available in other ways to support missions. When our kids were young, the church we went to would have a missions conference, and there'd always be a missionary who was there for several days, and we often volunteered to have that missionary stay in our home. And that was great because it helped our kids to see a much bigger world, and they were able to actually talk with the Christians and ask the missionaries and to ask questions. When our kids were older, we started hosting foreign exchange students in our home. And you know what? We didn't actively pursue any of those students. Through a series of circumstances, they just fell into our laps. And I know they didn't just fall into our laps. God knew we had hearts that were willing to open our home and our hearts to others. And so we hosted at least, I think it was about 4 different students. And also we were willing to open our home to people we knew. It wasn't just missionaries. My niece lived with us for over a year after she finished school so that she could get on her feet and earn a little money so she could get a place of her own. Another time we opened our home to our daughter's friend Renee, whose mother had remarried and had moved away. And Renee had been living at home while she was going to college to save money. So we opened our home and had Renee live with us until Renee finished college. When Dick's mom developed Alzheimer's, we had her live with us for 6 years. We currently have Dick's brother living with us. I'm saying all this to show you that our mission field has always been wherever God planted us and whomever he brought along our path. We were just willing to do that. It kind of is like on Andy's sermon last Sunday when he talked about authentic faith. We need to be obedient, our faith needs to be observable, and it needs to be action-oriented. I loved the quote that he had from Donald Miller that was on the wall of his dorm room that said, "What I believe is not what I say I believe. What I believe is what I do." Once our kids were grown, we were able to look at opportunities to go to see missions work in person. There was always a little struggle in my mind, though, to justify the cost of going because it can be expensive to go on trips to the mission field. But the Lord worked in my heart, and I said, okay, Lord, we'll do this. So there's something really valuable to actually see the work, what the work is like, and to meet the people who minister and who minister to others. My passion for supporting missions has increased after seeing that actual work. I've learned how to pray more specifically for people, and I've had the opportunity to go to Cambodia, Thailand, Nicaragua, and those trips have all touched and challenged me every time. And that leads to the trip to India, where my daughter and I just went in January. 2 years ago, I had told my daughter, I said, I want to take you on a special trip with just the two of us in 2024 because that happens to be a milestone birthday year for her. And I said, oh, we can go to Hawaii, Egypt, Iceland, any place you want to go. And she said, well, can we go to India? And I was like, okay. But it made total sense because she had started working for Tabitha's Heart as the stateside office/sponsorship coordinator. And she had only had contact with the people in India by internet. And so I said, well, let's look into it. We looked into it and to see if it was even possible. And it was not only possible, it was encouraged because they had not had any visitors since before COVID. So they were really happy to have Becky and I come. So on January 20th, we got on a plane, went to Chicago, had a 13-and-a-half-hour flight from there to Dubai, a 7-hour layover, and a 4-hour flight to Calcutta. And normally, I don't sleep very well on a plane, but we knew we had to get some sleep because we were going to hit the road running when we got there. And we slept for 8 hours on that flight from Chicago to Dubai, which is unheard of. And so I knew people were praying for us then. When we arrived, we were picked up by a driver from Tabitha's Heart. They own one vehicle and they hire a driver full-time who all day long he's transporting staff, students, children, wherever they go. They move food from one place to another. And so he took us to our hotel, which we checked in. Our hotel was right across the street from the slums of Park Street. If you see all the traffic there, it was amazing. They like to beep horns, constant beep, 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 beep. And it was all day long. Maybe in the middle of the night it quieted down, but you would hear that all the time. Also, just a block down the street across from this slum is the Park Street ministry site of Tabitha's Heart. So we were able to walk there. Once we got settled in at the hotel, Becky was able to change into some cultural type dress because she has a lot of international friends in the Fargo-Moorhead area. And then we walked and went down this walkway around a corner, and then we headed up to the ministry site, and we were able to sit in on a single mother's class and heard their stories and dreams. This is like a 6-month program. Some of these women couldn't even write their names when they started, and they are given a crash course to get a little bit of literacy, be able to do a little math, and to be able to set up some type of business so that they can earn money to support their family. That site also tutors kids after school who are maybe struggling in school. And we had that chance to see those kids. Every site also has a cook, and so this was the cook at that site. That was in the morning, and then we headed off to have a little walk, our initial walk into the slum area. People just surround Rachel there. They know her, and they love her. One of the things that was a little surprising to me was about a half block off the main drag where all those cars were is this sewage ditch. And I thought, as a nurse, wow, that is a petri dish for bacteria going on right there. And then we found out that all of the sewage, anything, toilets, everything goes into that ditch. When we were there, it's a little cooler time of year, but can you imagine what that would smell like when it's 100+ degrees? So after we had visited the slum area briefly, we were picked up again by the driver, and we headed about a 20-minute drive to a place where there was a women's ministry meeting. And what they do is the women of that neighborhood gather, and we drove there again. The traffic is like, even though it takes 20 minutes, it takes a while just because some of the streets you go through are really, really busy. And when we arrived, I was actually shocked to see this room just packed with women. And many of these women, they've come from multiple faiths, but they were hearing truth spoken by a staff member. After many of them lined up and asked for prayer. So Rachel translated, and then Becky and I prayed for dozens of women after. We were pretty tired by that time, so we headed back to the hotel. And then we had our next day, which happened to be a national holiday in India. So it was a perfect day to go and visit the children's home that Tabitha's Heart has, because the kids were off from school. So once again, we were picked up by the driver and taken there. And the children's home, the kids who live there, they're either orphans or they come from extremely dysfunctional families. Could be drug addicts, alcoholics, mental health issues. Many of the kids don't even have records of when they were born. They don't even know when their birthday is. And they've basically been living on the street. So what joy there was to see happy smiles on the faces of these kids. These were older girls. They have their own bedroom, but they've been in the home for quite a while. The younger kids, the girls and the boys, have bunk rooms. If you notice, there are no mattresses on the lower part, and that's because during the day they put them up because they have dogs. And I thought, wow, dogs. But I found out later that there's a real purpose for those dogs. We were there in the dry season, but in the rainy season when there's wet all the time, there are all kinds of critters that try to get into a dry spot. So there might be rats or snakes or something like that, and the dogs take care of that. So the dogs serve a really good purpose there. We had brought several kind of gifts for the kids, and so they had a chance to open some presents. Becky had brought nail polish, which was very popular among the little girls. These kids are sponsored individually, and that allows them to live a life away from the streets. And there is such a great need. They can't help everyone, but they can help some. And this little guy that Becky is holding, his name is Faizan. And you know what? The Imberg family in this church sponsors this little guy. And he is just He was just a sweetheart, just an active little boy. And the Imbergs had sent some gifts along for him. So he was pretty excited to have that bag. And if you look at this picture, you can see he's looking at the picture of the 3 Imberg boys. And they found out that he loves trucks. So they sent him some trucks and some Matchbox cars. And he was so happy to get those. So it was really fun to see him. And he's one that, it's really sad. His mother is a drug addict. And he was literally found on the streets wandering around as this little kid. And so it's, just, you feel like it's so good that he's got a stable place to be. This is the kitchen at the children's home. Every kitchen in the children's home, at the school, in the slum homes, they don't have any refrigeration. So what they have to do is, if they're going to have something that is fresh, they have to buy it that day and cook it. And they have to eat everything they have because there's no refrigeration after. You can see here that the kids were getting ready to line up. They always wash their hands really well before eating because they eat with their hands. And that might sound crazy, but it actually makes a lot of sense because bacteria is everywhere and they don't have good water. So this way they know that they've washed their hands well, that there's not going to be bacteria on utensils and things that they use, although they did give us utensils and we didn't get sick from that. So that was good. And the usual diet there is rice and potatoes and curry with either lentils and once or twice a week they add chicken to it. And they have that every day. So, if your kids are complaining about food, just imagine eating that meal every day, but they don't complain because, especially these kids, they sometimes didn't have food. And so they're very happy to have whatever they have. After lunch, we headed outside and Rachel's holding Faison, and we walked down about 10 minutes to an open area that would be called a park. The kids had bikes along. They played badminton. They could do some relay runs. And it was just wonderful to see the smiles on their faces. And it was hard for me to picture that all of these kids came from really difficult circumstances. And yet there was joy in their hearts. And so it just made me so thankful for Tabitha's Heart. And Tabitha's Heart is an organization that uses their money well. They have very low overhead. Becky my daughter is the only paid person in the States. She only works 10 hours a week and she works from home. So it isn't like they have an office. They don't rent office space. The space they rent, it's all ministry is done in that space. And they utilize it for their offices, whatever. After the park, we were able to sit in on a devotional time that they had that day. Becky was able to give a little message to the kids. And like kids everywhere, they loved having a treat. They had a special treat and they got to watch a movie because this was a holiday. And if you look at them, they're glued to the screen like you'd see our kids glued to a screen. When we were there were 29 kids at the home. The biggest challenge that they find at the home is to find staff that is loving and caring. They can find people who will wash the floor and serve the food, but they need they need staff who love the kids. If you look at the young man in the upper right corner who has the white shirt on his shirt, his name is Raj. When he was 10 years old, his mom committed suicide. And so he basically grew up the rest of his growing up years in the children's home. And he now is married and has a child, but he works with the kids at the home. And it was just so evident that he truly loves those kids because he knows what it's like to live in that situation. So we headed back to our hotel, and then we were ready for the next day, which then we're off and running again in the vehicle, and we headed to a place where they were having a staff meeting. And this was really fun because Becky actually got to sit in on a staff meeting with everyone else. And they had a really good time of an ice-breaking session, some brainstorming, and a family from this church provided the money to buy lunch for the staff that day. And that was so appreciated by everyone. And so I want to thank that family for doing that. We got to spend quite a bit of time with this guy named Dinesh. Dinesh is like Rachel's right-hand man. He does so much for the ministry, but he has been through a lot of struggle. During COVID, his mom died. And recently, his wife, Monita, has had very serious kidney problems that without a miracle of healing will not go away. Right now, 40% of her kidney capacity is permanently damaged. The latest need for her is to find some computer-based work so that she could work from home. We headed back again, and then our fourth day there, we were going to head to the school that's called Charisma Academy. I wanted to show you just how smoggy Calcutta is. The air quality is very poor. In the mornings especially, it was worse, but it never really improved a lot during the day, so they're breathing that all the time. The school buildings that Charisma Academy has, they have two different buildings. The first one is 2 stories high, and the second one is a single story. So we went to the 2-story building first. On the first floor, they have the younger kids, and they gather every day, and they have a time of worship and a little devotional. Becky was able to give a little update and talk about their sponsors. This class is kindergartners, and we were told that most of these kids are not sponsored. If they aren't sponsored, they use money from the general fund to cover the costs that they have until hopefully someone sponsors them. And a sponsorship means that what they get is 1 uniform, 1 pair of socks, 1 pair of shoes, and it's their school fees, their books, and then a meal. And those kids, if you'll look here, this is the kindergarten class to the left. It's one big room, and all they have are curtains that divide them. And I was amazed at how well-behaved and quiet they were, because it could be chaotic. And not only was there noise from, the classrooms, but you could hear the street, because it's just everywhere you go, it's constant horn beeping. And then 5 times a day, there's the Muslim call to worship, which is broadcast very loudly, and it lasts probably a good 5 minutes or more. And yet they were totally unfazed. They just went about their things. So we were able to connect with some people or some children that we knew who were sponsored. Now, this little guy's name is Abdul, and he happens to be sponsored by our oldest son. So we were able to give him a little gift. We got to see his classroom. I was able to give him a big hug and show him some pictures of our son and told him that we pray for him. And then the next one we got to meet was really exciting because her name is Saika, and she happens to be sponsored by the Living Stones Children's Ministry. If you go down into the children's ministry, you will see a mural on the wall that shows Cokato and Calcutta with a picture of Saika there. Before we went, I had also taken pictures of the kids who were sponsoring. So she was given these photographs so that she knows what kids are sponsoring her. And in this picture, they were giving a shout out to Saika. I was able to give her a hug, and I said, this hug is from all the children at Living Stones Church. And in the gift bag, there were several letters and little gifts for her. Here, Dinesh is translating for her, so she understood who the pictures were, where they were from, and then we got to see her in her classroom, and she was just so pleased. We could see Becky and I were behind some curtains, and periodically we'd see Saika open the curtain and look at us, and then there's only one bathroom on each floor, and then she had to get up and go to the bathroom to walk by us, so it was really cute. And this is her classroom. And if you see the woman with the green scarf, that was her teacher. And after lunch, her teacher was going to translate all the letters from the kids. So she was going to hear from every one of those kids who wrote a letter. And I can tell you that it meant a lot to her. After we headed to the second floor, which again is another open space, and you can see Dinesh's desk is there. A lady who coordinates the food service for that site is there, and the classes are there. And this was her making us, Becky and I, some chai tea. We had chai tea wherever we went because that's considered a sign of hospitality. And Becky had a chance to talk with Dinesh, and you can see classrooms everywhere. Here you see the classroom, and then there are dividers with shelving, with cupboards, and that had library books and supplies. The older kids also meet, and they have a time of singing and a devotional time. Our family does sponsor a girl named Sonia, and I had written a letter to her before we went saying we were coming. And when we got there, I did not realize how emotional I would feel about meeting her. I had a gift bag for her, and she had a gift for me. So it was really, I just can't tell you, it was unbelievable to meet her. And this is Sonia's teacher and her class again. The kids there also line up, and they wash hands well before lunch. Becky was chatting with some of the students. This is the one bathroom on this floor, has a sink where they all wash up at. And this is a normal toilet in India. They're called squatty potties. And how you flush it is you just take a scoop of water from the pail and you flush it. And there wasn't toilet paper and things, so it was a little bit, we had to improvise, I'll have to tell you. So, and this was one of the ladies serving lunch. She was serving the rice, and this lady was serving the curry, and they also had potatoes. And this is a common thing. They basically have this type of food every day. But I can tell you, we did not hear one complaint, and every kid ate their food because they probably aren't getting a lot of other food otherwise. And so that they appreciated that a lot. We headed off to the next building again. That driver was like there whenever we needed it. The streets were busy. And in the other building, it was a single story, but again, all in open area. And this is the kitchen. She cooked the food for the 200 kids. And for the first site we were at, what they do is they send the food with the driver and send it to the other site so that they can serve the food. And all they have, there's no refrigeration, but they have a propane tank, and they cook the food that way. Here she's ready to serve the food. And you can see, now Becky's not much taller than I am, and so you can see that this lady was not, they're pretty short. They're small people, and I'm sure it's because of the nutrition. This picture we took just so you could see the size of the pot that they cook the white rice in. This is where those kids wash their hands, and there was the squatty potty for that site. Kids were lining up, getting their food, eating with their fingers, which is normal. And then they had 2 large classes in that site. This is what the street looks like outside of that school. One of the things that struck me was that the end of the school year was about the time we were there. I think they had one more week after we were there, and then they were starting a new session. And we were told that there are families that come and they knock on the door and just beg, can our kids come to this school? And they can't take everybody because there's just not space, and also because of the cost for doing it. After we had visited the schools, Dinesh took us for our tourist part of our trip, and he took us to a mall that was very close to the slums. That's like a modern mall. We took him to lunch at a Chili's restaurant, and that was just like, it's almost like mind-boggling the contrast that there was. We visited Mother Teresa's house because that's in the same area on Park Street where she worked when she was there. to end the day, we ended back at the Park Street site, which was close to our hotel. Got to sit in on another class with single moms. And we also got to see they had a youth group meeting there that day. So that was the end of that day. And unfortunately, both Becky and I got sick between that night to the Friday morning. All along, our plan had been to spend 2 days on an excursion to go and see the Taj Mahal, which is on the opposite side of India. And so, man, I thought, what are we going to do? So we decided we loaded up on Imodium, put our Depends on, and headed off. We had a 2-hour flight to Delhi and then a 3-hour car ride from Delhi to Agra, where the Taj Mahal is. When we arrived in Delhi, the driver gave us, they were actually beautiful. They were real flower leis, and I think they were marigolds. I'm not sure. Part of this trip, when we look back, we go, oh yeah, I'm glad we took pictures because we were kind of halfway in it and halfway out of it. We stopped at a wonderful restaurant, and all we could really eat that we felt like eating was a little soup. And we felt bad because they brought out this wonderful food. And even they came and they said, don't you like our food? And we said, I think we'd love it, but we can't eat it right now. We don't feel well. So finally, after that, we told our guide, don't take us to any restaurants because we can't eat that food anyway. So that first day, we did get to see the Taj Mahal. This time of year, it can be very foggy there. And we went to a place that was across the river from the Taj Mahal. And we could see it from there. After that, we told him, we said, can we just go to the hotel? And it was a God thing. We needed to be there to go to this wonderful Western-style hotel that had a real bathroom with a hot shower and a comfortable bed, and we literally slept like 12 hours. We got started on our antibiotics, and we knew that we would be better within probably 24 hours, but we needed time to kind of just make it through. On that second day they were there, we took us to a couple of places where artisans work, which was actually quite interesting. These women, it can take them anywhere from 3 months to 2.5 years to make a rug, depending on the size of the rug and how thick the rug is. They also took us to another place where they do detailed embroidery, and in the embroidery they embed jewels. And so these were wall hangings. Originally, what they did was they used to make ornate gowns for people, and that's where they got that talent. But no, they don't make those gowns. Instead, they make wall hangings, and they sell those. We were so fortunate because, as I told you, a lot of times this time of year, it can be really foggy in the Agra area, and we happened to get a day that was blue sky and sunshine. So in spite of not feeling great, we did get to see the Taj Mahal. It was pretty interesting. After that, we had our 3-hour ride back to Delhi, and we both snoozed at the airport and were close to a bathroom. And then we were on our flight back to Calcutta, got there about midnight. And by Sunday morning, we were feeling much better than we had been. We went to the Park Street site where they had a Sunday school class for the kids, for the younger kids. And they were so crowded in there that they had to divide it up after to go into other little rooms so that they could do a little coloring of the pictures from the story that they had heard. And then after that, they had a service for the teenagers and the young adults. If you look at the young man with the guitar on the left, he was a student. He had gone through the school, and now he is their worship leader. And we saw him. He is at many sites leading worship. And so that was really fun to be able to see the fruit of the labor that Tabitha's heart, to see people being successful in different ways. And these were the young people who were there. I can't remember his first name, the music leader, but he was a really happy guy, and they loved selfies. I can't tell you how many selfies we were in. Okay, on our last day in Calcutta, we were able to visit a lot of homes, slum homes. In fact, we had invitations from so many of the older kids who had been through the program. They wanted us to come to their home. If you see this, if you look at that on the building on the right, the government a few years ago did put a building in that's a communal bathroom and shower. So at least they have a place to go because their homes do not have water. There's no plumbing. Most don't have electricity. If they do have electricity, it's probably not legal. It's somehow jimmied in. And they don't have water, so there are communal places where they can get water. This is Fatima, and she is a gal who has graduated from the program, and she wanted us to come to her home, and we were able to oblige and do that. Although she wanted to cook us something, but we said we can't have anything right now because we had been sick. But her home is about 8 feet by 8 feet. It is on the sidewalk, right next to the busy Park Street. And in that 8 by 8 foot place, 2 adults and 3 teenagers sleep. But she was so proud to show us her place. And I'll have to say it was quite humbling, to be wanted so much. And I thought, oh man, if we have so much that we kind of gripe about when we don't have something, and they're happy with what they have. Rachel is just surrounded by people anywhere we walk when it was through the slum areas. There were lots of animals about. In this home was about, I would say 8 by 10 feet maybe, and 7 people lived there. But they had a kind of a little loft, and then so it's older ones sleep on the top, and then little ones sleep on the bottom. And I even said, well, what do you do with the babies? Because I was thinking, how do you do this? They put the babies there, and then some of the homes don't have doors. And so I know that there are a lot of rats in the slums. And I said, how do you protect the kids? And Rachel told us a story when she was first there that they brought a baby to her where a rat had chewed its toe off, and I was like, oh man, I'm like, you just feel like, how do you protect your little ones? This home also was interesting because they had a pet monkey, which was kind of interesting. So it's 7 people and a pet monkey in that space. They hang everything up here and there, and, they live their lives. And I'm still saying they seem relatively happy in spite of it all. Here you see it's smoky. And the reason it's smoky is that they're cooking. They don't have a stove. They have a little pot that's a charcoal pot with a grate on it, and that's how they do their cooking. So we breathed a lot of smoke when we were in the walking in that slum area. Here again, you see the joyful faces. The young man on the right with the white shirt told us over and over that he was so grateful for Tabitha's heart. He had gone through the program. He's currently in college, and he's studying to do a business degree, and his dream is to open an exercise gym. And here's a picture of the cooking pot and a woman cooking meals. And again, there's no refrigeration, so they have to cook what they can, and they have to eat it and do that for the meals that they have. And I talked about the communal water spots, and those were those. And here we are with 2 of the students who had gone through the program, and they spent a fair amount of time with us. So that was our last full day there. And they took us back to the mall, and at the bottom of the mall there was a grocery store, which was like totally modern. and we wanted to buy a few things for Becky's kids there. And also she had promised to bring some cookware to one of her international friends who wanted something because they said, oh, it's cheaper in India. So Becky had a room because we had brought so many things along that her suitcase was pretty empty going back, so she had room to do that. And there she is paying for her purchase. And right after that, we were taken along because Tabitha's Heart had gotten word about some children in another slum area that Tabitha's Heart doesn't serve, but there were kids who didn't. They had no parents. Their parents were gone, and they were neglected. So we went along. We did not take pictures, but my heart went out because two of the kids, they were so dirty. Their clothes were dirty. I think they had lice in their hair. They were cared for by elderly great aunts who couldn't care for them anymore. And we didn't really know what the story would be, what would happen to them. But a couple weeks later, we got a picture of the three kids we saw who are now living at the children's home. They're 10, 8, and 6. None of them had ever attended school. So they were going to start going to school. And they were so happy to be there because they had food, they had clothing, and it just warmed our hearts that happened. So the next morning we had our last wild ride through Calcutta, headed to the airport, and then we had a 5-hour flight to Dubai. When we got to Dubai, we had a message from Rachel. In this picture, you'll see a young woman who's sitting. She was cutting some vegetables. It's in one of the homes we had visited on Monday. And she wanted to hear what we were doing, so she was doing her work while she was listening. Well, while we were flying to Dubai, she had gotten suddenly ill, and by the time she got to the hospital, she had died. They said they think she had a stroke. And she left 4 children. The oldest is like 13 or 14, I don't remember which, a boy and another boy who were in the school program. And the sad part was that she had begged us to come to her home, to see her home. And Rachel had told her, we don't have time today, but the next time I come, I'll come and visit you. The good news is that her 2 children who are in school and the 2 aren't, there's a community that will surround them and help those kids along. The dad apparently was an alcoholic, so the whole situation is not good, but they have people who can surround them. When we got to Dubai, it was again like culture shock. Dubai is like ultra modern. And we knew we had a 22-hour layover there, so we had a hotel, and ahead of time I had arranged for us to take an excursion. We went on a luxury dinner cruise. It was in the harbor of Dubai, and you could see the lights of the city, which were gorgeous. And that buffet dinner, I can't tell you, we just loved having fresh salads and fresh fruit and food that we didn't fear that we were going to get sick if we ate it. It was a really pleasant a pleasant way to end our trip. The next day we had a 15-hour flight from Dubai to Chicago, and then a layover there, and then we arrived back in Minneapolis that night, and it was an unbelievable trip. And we were told that it was like God ordained that we had been there, because we got to see everything we had hoped to see. And even though we got sick, we were sick, the timing was perfect. That's when we needed to be sick if we were going to be sick. And so we were very thankful for that. And right now I'm going to ask Becky to come up and she'll share briefly, what her role is at Tabitha's Heart and talk a little about sponsorship.
Hello, as my mom said, my name is Becky. My family and I live in Moorhead. And first, so for Tabitha's Heart, I do the administrative stuff on the U.S. side, as she said, working from my home. So if you ever need to update your credit card, or you have a question, or you want to, anything like that, I would be the person that the phone number comes to or the email comes to. And so it's been a joy to be able to just be a small part of that. So I do just want to, first of all, say thank you collectively as a church for supporting the work there. As my mom said, it was truly just touching. I wish every single person could go there, because it's like, when you're supporting people or organizations that it's important, but to actually see it was amazing. And just as she said, knowing that like literally every penny is like, you saw the room with like so many people crammed in there, and just like there's nothing wasted. And so thank you for collectively supporting the work there, and individually, I know many of you support that. And so thank you for that. So kind of what are things that you can do as a body here? First of all, the most important thing is probably just to pray. We can't really go into too much detail because this is recorded, but we would love to personally share many stories of how he is at work there. But just know, like, it is a battle on every level, and nothing is ever easy. So please pray for the work there. Secondly, if you are looking for a way to financially support them, the biggest way is we are looking for sponsors. It's actually really hard to find people these days who are willing to commit to sponsoring a child for just a little over $1 a day. The sponsorship, as my mom said, provides the school fees, because school is not free there. School is like a half a day long. And so what's common there is if people are paying for their kids to go to school, they also pay for tutoring, just to supplement what's going on, because it's not a whole day. And so the kids will have their school fees paid for. It also pays for the tutoring. They get a meal, their clothes, their books, and all of that money goes towards that child. And so I brought out in the foyer, we have several, but this little girl's name is Zabia. She lives at the children's home and is in preschool, actually probably just switched to kindergarten. We don't actually know her birthday, but they decided to celebrate it this year in August. And he probably saw a little girl either with her tongue out or little peace sign fingers. That was Zabia. She was such a cutie and so full of spunk. And she and her sister have lived there for about a year. She has 4 other siblings, and they were just literally like on the side of the road. Their mom had to work and had to just leave them in their little roadside house to try to provide for them. And so she lives at our children's home. This little guy is Farhan, so he attends the school that Tabitha's Heart runs. And most of the kids there, a lot of them have 2 parents, and many of them work, but just it's not enough. When they do work, it's like minimum wage jobs. And like if the mom is working as a household maid, they make at most like $2 a day. And so that's just not enough. I mean, the food costs were not much different than here. And so just thinking about that, it's just not enough. And so anyway, here's a little boy who loves to play soccer and cricket. And also when he has a chance, mobile phone games. So he's like many. So that's one way. You also heard about the Women's Small Business Training Program. So as my mom said, the ladies participate for 6 months in that. And during that time, they are given a small stipend because they do often work. And they wouldn't be able to participate in the program. And then once they finish it, they are given the supplies that they need to run that. And just hearing many stories, I mean, just seeing their faces, and some of them, like Dinesh had told us, that many of the women just were so filled with shame looking at the ground when they started the program. There was one lady whose husband had died suddenly from a heart issue, but like the family blamed her for that, even though there was nothing she could do about it. And just to see the hope that they have, to know that not only hope in the present life, but eternally as well, just was truly life-changing. And one story I love to hear is a lady who a few years back participated in our program. She was able to start her home business. She was able to pay for the school fees for her kids and get a better home and provide food, and also to pay for a tutor for her older son, who his dream was to be a doctor. But for kids in the slums, like, that's literally an impossible dream. But he was able to work hard at school, get the proper tutoring, and he took like the national exam for medical things. And he was one of the top scorers and got to go to any school of his choice in India to be able to receive his training. And so just knowing like the impact that has generationally and within the community. We also heard stories of just transformed, like the slum areas were filled with drugs, and how that's not the case because kids have hope. And just seeing that was so touching. So anyway, for the Women's Small Business Training Program, there can be gifts on a one-time basis. I think it's about $600 for the women to participate in the whole training. So you could sponsor one person to do that. We have others who each month will pay like $50 for the ongoing program of that. So there are many ways like that to do that. And then the last way to support is if you ever would like to go, they're always willing to have visitors. Don't let the illness scare you. It wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't the worst thing ever either. And it was totally worth it. And for example, the teachers at the school would really love to have like professional development because they don't have that there. And just to learn how to be better teachers, they have asked many times. And so they just need some people who have the skills to be able to teach other teachers how to teach. That's one practical thing. In the past, they've had some groups that have come and helped build tables and practical things like that. So just on behalf of Tabitha's Heart, thank you so much for your support in every way. Thank you personally for praying for us. It was such a blessing to be able to go and see it, and we could tell people were praying. So if you are interested in seeing some of the students, they are all listed on our website. We have actually 150 kids who are waiting for sponsors, and even that has kind of limited some of the work that they can continue because we just need people to sponsor them. And as a parent, it's a huge opportunity even to teach your kids about what it means to give, even just seeing the difference culturally, as my mom had shared, just that the world is a big place, and we have, as followers, a privilege to be able to share the hope that we have. So we will be out in the foyer, and just thank you so much for this chance to be able to share this morning.